The Freedom Caucus stood in the Rayburn room right as the House was getting ready to pass this a couple days before and said it would take weeks to get this bill back into shape. It's getting better, but it's not there yet. 2 days later, the entire Freedom Caucus voted yes, and the chairman, Andy Harris, voted present, which allowed the bill to pass. So let's see what they do.
Good morning, I'm Anna Palmer.
And I'm Jake Sherman.
And welcome to the Daily Punch, brought to you by Punchbowl News. It's Wednesday, June 18th, 2025. Let's get into the mix. Here are your Washington headlines of the morning. Number one, the White House amps up pressure on Senate Republicans to move fast on reconciliation, and it's Dems' big moment. Number two, remember the Trump budget cuts? The rescission package faces an uncertain future in the Senate. And number three, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth heads to Capitol Hill today as Trump eyes a possible Iran strike. Good morning, Jake. A ton to talk about. It is a very busy Wednesday morning here in Washington. Let's get to it. We are leading Punchbowl News AM with a look at the latest on reconciliation. And I thought it might make sense to break this up into two parts. Let's talk first procedures. Dems' big moment. We've been talking about Republicans for weeks now, but this is really Senate Democrats' big moment to try to kind of push things out, see if they can get the bird bath to make it so that some of these policies don't stay in the final package.
Well, yes, a lot to talk about. Anna, is it ever going to stop raining in Washington? I was just thinking.
I feel like we are in Seattle. We are in the wrong Washington. It has been a tough spring here.
What is going on here? Well, anyway, okay, yeah. So, I feel like JD Vance is getting aligned with our worldview here, which is reconciliation by July 4th is very difficult. This is what Ted Cruz told us in an event last week, and he wants it done by August recess, which is what I'll give Brez credit. Brez is a proud non-listener of this podcast, but he has been.
We're gonna get him one day, Jake. One day.
I'd hope so. He's said that August is a much more natural backdrop to get reconciliation done. So let's talk, Anna, quickly about the procedural hurdles. The procedural hurdles are numerous, and Laura did a great job this morning on reporting out I think it's 5 she has procedural hurdles for the reconciliation bill. There's the current policy baseline. This is the way that Republicans are basically saying that the tax cuts cost nothing because they're extending current policy. That's number one. Gun and silencer provisions in finances text. They are cutting taxes on guns and suppressors, and the bill eases licensing and registration requirements. Social Security numbers for tax benefits under finance, which aim to exclude undocumented immigrants. Commerce's language on states not regulating AI, which, by the way, the AI reg moratorium for states is probably the most controversial, and I would guess the most likely to get knocked out of this thing. And by the way, a lot of people wouldn't be upset about that, especially in the House where this has been somewhat controversial, and in the
Senate Republicans too, Jake. I mean, this isn't just Democrats who find this potentially controversial.
Oh, yeah. Josh Hawley and Marsha Blackburn already oppose it, as Laura notes. And judiciary's new limits on judges' powers to issue preliminary injunctions against the federal government. The House has already passed a bill on this front. And, the thing with the bird bath, Anna, is that it has to directly deal. I'm oversimplifying it for effect, not for effect, but for brevity, I guess is the way to say it. It has to deal with budget, debts, deficit spending, and not with policy. And, all of those things are very challengeable at the bird process, Anna.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where the rubber meets the road, right? You've had the House pass their package. Now we've been kind of waiting for the Senate. The text is out. But all eyes are going to be on the bird rule, the bird bath, getting through this process. What is, kind of deemed that, on both sides, able to get in, get out. And then, that doesn't even come into play with what I think is actually kind of the larger meta issue for Republicans, right? So these are really important. It's going to be super consequential, but you still have a lot of Republicans, Jake, who are not supportive or ready to put, cast an aye vote in support of this measure, right? Whether it's kind of the fiscal hawks, whether it's Medicaid questions, whether it's a lot of things that, this White House is trying to put the pressure on. They've got J.D. Vance, their former colleague, the vice president, say, we got to move, guys. This is the best it's going to get. But there is a lot of skepticism so far.
Yeah. So this is I think back to a couple months ago, many months ago at this point, Shelley Moore Capito at a Punchbowl News event explained to us her skepticism about cutting Medicaid or changes to Medicaid. She said in West Virginia, we've got 700,000 people who are on Medicaid in some way, shape, or form. It's a lot of people. And here we have Jim Justice, the newly elected senator from West Virginia, who said, I've got major problems. That's all there is to it. And he also wants to talk about the provider tax, which could hurt rural hospitals. He said, it's an aggressive timeline, that's for sure. And Anna, your home state compatriot, Kevin Kramer, said,
from my hometown, Jake, from
your hometown, Kindred, it said, this bill is as close. He's talking about Vance's pitch to Senate Republicans, and he said this is what Vance said. This bill is as close to perfect as you can make it in the current situation, and we need to pass it because it's better than not passing it.
A tough road to hoe when that is the selling point, right? Not like, hey, we're excited. This is going to do big things. It's like, hey, this is the best it's going to get. Let's go.
Yeah, but I mean, yes, but I'll say this: no one's making the argument that they're not going to pass it. That's not like I don't know that the argument is pass it or don't pass it. Everyone thinks every Republican wants to pass this in some way. Right. The question is, do they want to pass it as is, and do they need to pass it by July 4th? And the answer to that, is both no. And Chip Roy is out there on Twitter and giving interviews saying, the rollback or the reverting of the IRA credits back to where they were before the Freedom Caucus got involved, that will cause him to vote no. We'll see. I tweeted this yesterday, but the Freedom Caucus stood in the Rayburn room right as the House was getting ready to pass this a couple days before and said it would take weeks to get this bill back into shape. It's getting better, but it's not there yet. 2 days later, the entire Freedom Caucus voted yes, and the chairman, Andy Harris, voted present, which allowed the bill to pass. So let's see what they do. Let's see, because they've made a lot of threats here, and they did it during House passage, and they haven't, but I don't mean to dismiss their concerns. They're real concerns that the leadership has to figure out. But let's be real here.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, the other thing we haven't talked about, but we have talked about ad nauseum on this podcast, is the SALT provision that still needs to be negotiated. And if there's big changes here, the House is going to have to pass this again. And so I think, to your point, I actually think it's a really important point that you're making, right? As much as there are people who don't like certain provisions, no one's trying to get a coalition to tank the bill, right? And so at the end of the day, this is going to be a big leadership push, and you're going to have John Thune and the Speaker figure out how to get people to yes, even though they might be doing it, kind of holding their nose with the final package to get it done. And whether that's July 4th, or that's kind of the end of August, through with a little bit more negotiations, that to me is the bigger issue.
Well, let's see them get this through the Senate first and even get it on the floor. They want this thing on the floor next week, and the deficit concerns are, to me, the most trouble. I mean, SALT is a big deal, but internally in the Senate, the deficit concern should be the most troubling, because this is not, well, we're cutting X from Medicaid and not Y, or we are, this tax is not great, or we want to spare this industry and not that industry. This bill is fundamentally not good enough for me and for us. And that should be of concern, because that is a fundamental concern, a fundamental problem, a structural problem with the legislation. And those are more difficult to solve, especially on a tight timeline.
All right, on to the number 2 story of the morning, Jake. Andrew Desiderio has a really nice item here laying out the challenges that the Senate is facing when it comes to this rescissions package that the White House wants passed. Senate Majority Leader John Thune is sending the measure through the Senate Appropriations Committee Committee, whose chair Susan Collins, the Republican from Maine, is a leading skeptic of the package. Time is of the essence here. I think the big question is whether or not and how much does Susan Collins decide that this, some of the cuts, whether it's to public broadcasting, she in particular has noted PEPFAR as one of the cuts that she has some real concerns around. But what happens here? Do they force this on as a kind of a floor measure, and then they kind of do it on the floor, trying to find changes and things like that, which would then have to go back to the House? This is a little bit of a mess.
Yeah, this $9.4 billion bill is the centerpiece of the quote unquote DOGE effort and the budget cutting priorities of the Trump administration. It's now going to the Appropriations Committee. It needs to pass the Senate by July 18th, or else Trump has to spend the money as Congress has mandated already. I mean, that's as simple as it gets. It needs to pass in a month. And again, fundamental problems with this. Collins, chair of the Appropriations Committee, said, I've made very clear I do not like the cuts to global health programs like PEPFAR. There are people who say that they have problems with cutting public broadcast funding. I mean, Republicans make the point, well, the government shouldn't be funding public broadcasting networks and, NPR, PBS, Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Mike Rounds, South Dakota, not North Dakota, but close, said that there are Native American reservations in South Dakota relying on radio stations that receive federal funding. Rounds said they'd have no place else to get funding. Okay, well, that's a problem for Republicans. So let's see where this heads. The House passed it, and it wasn't easy for the House to pass it. It was a close vote. Everything's a close vote in the House. They had some problems. So, let's see where this goes. And I'll say, if this gets any more mild, the House will have to pass it again, and that will be a problem.
All right, stay tuned. We will be following that. Let's run to the number 3 story of the morning. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth returns to Capitol Hill today as the war between Israel and Iran rages on, and the world waits to see what President Donald Trump will do. He is there to talk about the budget, but clearly will be facing questions from both Democrats and Republicans here about what the administration is going to do, the posture, and, certainly facing some skepticism by Democrats and others in terms of the U.S.'s posture and getting into and taking a more active role in the Middle East.
Yeah, Hegseth is going to get a lot of questions because Trump has basically been saying, Trump said yesterday he would assassinate the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, and he said that the U.S. is in control, at least, in control of Iranian airspace. We didn't know that the U.S. was involved in Israel's attacks on Iran. We knew that it was supporting it, but there's been no evidence that they're patrolling the skies. He had a Situation Room meeting yesterday on the Iran situation. So is Trump going to greenlight a bunker-busting bomb on the Iranian nuclear facility at Fordow? That's what people are going to be asking. I don't imagine that Hegseth is going. I guess I could be surprised, but I don't think Hegseth is going to make news. I don't think he's going to say definitively one way or another. Yesterday, J.D. Vance came up to the Hill and said, there might be a time where Trump thinks it's necessary. And that was kind of big news. Jack Reed with a great quote this morning in the news in the newsletter. There's a tendency, Max got this great quote. There's a tendency to take a short-term view when in fact we've discovered to our chagrin that it's easier to break things in the Middle East than to put them together. Israel's been bombing Iran now for days, as launched a heavy barrage of missiles on Tehran. So this is supposed to be, Anna, just a regular budget hearing on the 2026 budget request. Maybe Hegseth gets some questions on that. I am sure he will. But there's kinetic military activity in the Middle East. And that's going to be a huge focus.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thanks so much for listening. We appreciate it. If you like the Daily Punch, share it on social media. Tell your friends and family. It's the best way for folks to find out about us. And of course, you can go deeper on all these issues and more by signing up for our free morning newsletter at punchbowl.news. Have a great day and stay safe, everybody.